Let's not sugarcoat it. The path to financial independence is a grind. Even with an aggressive savings rate and an extended bull market run, you're going to be at it for a while. Setting the hard work aside, we also have to ask ourselves, what are we racing towards? Yes, of course, financial independence and freedom, but what would you do with that newfound freedom? This is where I'd like to insert the idea of mini retirements. This intentional time off of work can help us re-energize and explore what retirement life would really look like. This is exactly what our guest, Jillian Johnsrud, did. During her journey to financial independence, Jillian embraced 12 mini retirements and now coaches others on how to take mini retirements themselves. I love the idea of mini retirements. I've already taken one in 2020 and plan on taking many more throughout my life. Looking back, it was one of the best decisions I made in my 20s, but it did come with some doubts. Most notably, I asked the question, is this temporary time off worth delaying financial independence? This is a question I asked Jillian, and what she told me surprised me. Many retirements didn't delay financial independence for her. They did the opposite. They expedited it. Stick around if you want to hear that story and more. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with the master of retiring often, Jillian Johnsrud. You know those moments where you think, I wish I would have learned this in school? Those are the topics that we love to talk about. Join me each week as I interview experts sharing their strategies for solving problems that us young adults will face throughout our 20s and 30s. So what are you waiting for? If you want new episodes about adulting advice every Monday, hit that follow button. Well, Jillian, I'm really excited for this conversation. This topic is near and dear to my heart as somebody that did take a mini retirement a couple of years ago and now benefiting so much from that time off, and probably prior to actually taking it, not really feeling like I was allowed to. Mm-hmm. I like mini retirements for a lot of different reasons. And I think it's a little counterintuitive to what we typically talk about, or at least it seems counterintuitive, because I'm talking about the path to financial independence so often. And so many people are like, well, taking time off of work, I'm slowing down, essentially putting gasoline on the fire. Like, why would I do that? But we'll probably talk a little bit more about that in the later half of this episode, and how you might be surprised where your income actually lands kind of post mini retirement. But I love it for just the concept of taking a break, because this journey of financial independence is a long one, and you should allow yourself to take breaks and be rejuvenated. But at the same time too, like, what are you chasing? Like, what would potentially post-fi look like? And the concept of mini retirements almost lets you test drive some things of how you would actually spend your time post, financial independence. So really excited for this conversation today, Jillian.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off with definitions. I would like to define exactly what you mean by a mini retirement. There are a couple of other colloquial names that are thrown out there, like sabbaticals. You have 3 components that you feel like really make up a mini retirement, at least in the context of how we're going to talk about it today. Can you share those?
Yeah, the first one is the length. I think a month or longer. Anything a month or longer is kind of the sweet spot. The second is stepping away from your 9 to 5. And I add that one in because it doesn't necessarily mean you do no work or, you're just on a beach the whole time. Like, there are some really cool, interesting things you can be doing with your time, but stepping away from your primary career. And the third one is to focus on something that matters to you. So this kind of distinguishes the time off versus, like, maybe you got laid off and you were depressed and you bummed around and watched Netflix and ate Cheetos and felt really bad for yourself. I wouldn't necessarily consider that a mini retirement, because unless you were able to pivot and really focus on something that mattered to you during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the intentionality behind this. It wasn't just an unexpected event that put you out of work for a month plus. There is a little bit of intentionality behind this, especially with that third aspect, which you referenced, is focusing on something that really matters to you. So let's double click into that and actually talk a little bit more about that, because whenever I think mini retirement, I immediately go to travel. And I'm sure a lot of people do. And I think that could be a really great option for mini retirements, going with this extended time off and ability to be a lot more mobile throughout time zones and just, driving and whatnot, you can go see parts of the United States or the world that you've never gotten to see. You can take long trips to places that would get you really excited to explore a little bit more from just like the context of not just 1 or 2 days somewhere, but maybe multiple weeks or months somewhere. But there are other options out there in terms of intentions behind a mini retirement. Outside of travel, how else have you seen people use mini retirements?
So an overarching theme are things that are hard to fit into your nights and weekends. Like what doesn't fit alongside your job. So like you mentioned, slow travel, long travel, like it's tough to do a trip to Paris or go to Southeast Asia over the weekend and it be the kind of experience you want it to be. But there's a bunch of other things that don't really fit, whether it's a passion project or getting healthy or, I built out a food forest in my backyard one summer. And right now, I think a big trend in the US especially is recovering from burnout. It is really hard to recover from burnout in the situation that created the burnout. So being able to step away and actually focus on your mental health, your physical health, your rest, I see that as a high priority for a lot of people.
For sure. Yeah, I stole this from you, but I wrote down all of these bullets as potential options. You said travel, quality time, time with extended family and friends, projects, recovering from burnout, improved health, professional growth, test driving retirement, long-held dreams, and hard things, which is a great catch-all. Yeah. Like, there are just some hard things, like building out your whole backyard, which I'm sure took quite a bit of labor and time in there. And I love that. I think that was really cool.
Well, and in that hard things category, I would add, we think about mini retirements oftentimes as like, I'm going to do this fun, exciting thing. But sometimes life gives us difficult things that we also need to step back and have that time to prioritize. So I've had coaching clients that, their parents got Alzheimer's and they wanted to take time and get them set up and not add something tough and stressful on top of a job that's tough and stressful. So whether it's focusing on someone's mental health or their physical health or someone passes away, sometimes we need the ability to give ourselves this time to do, even though it's a hard thing, this thing that is really meaningful and important to us.
Yeah, that's so true. I also love the professional growth aspect of it too, or even just career pivots. I feel like sometimes it's hard to make pivots while you're in a 9 to 5 and all of a sudden it's like, 5 to 9, I got to focus on trying to build this skill set over here or applying for different jobs or working on a side hustle or business. Like sometimes you just need to step away from your current work in order to like fully immerse yourself in some of these things or take on opportunities that just might take a little bit of time. Like, for example, this is probably not in that same vein, but how your husband took automotive classes and wanted to really explore that and fill his cup in that way. And I think it could either be for a career pivot or just something professionally or personally that you really wanted to explore, but you want to invest a lot of time up front in and be kind of immersed in it.
Yeah. And I see this actually happening 2 ways. One, people know what they want to do and they want the time and the mental and emotional bandwidth to really lean in. But I was kind of surprised. I just finished a group coaching cohort, and I would say 75% of the people in the cohort wanted to start thinking about a career pivot. And this is really common when people are burned out. It's so hard to imagine life being different. It's so hard to imagine, what would I like to do? What fits my skill set? What might I enjoy? Like, what are the other options out there? Because one of the functions of burnout is to get you out of the stressful, difficult situation. And so one of the ways it does that is to narrow your focus, to narrow your vision, to keep you focused just on the path ahead, to move you through the difficult thing and not basically to make sure you don't get distracted by other pursuits. So oftentimes people take a mini retirement to recover from burnout and just to imagine, what else could I do? What other professional things? Like, am I going to do this thing for the rest of my life? Or is there another option?
I love that. And that's actually how my mini retirement came to be. So I was with an employer for 7 years. I liked it, but it was just okay. And as someone that started with that employer at 19 and now I was in my mid-20s, I was just kind of curious on what else was out there. But I didn't really allow myself to do that. I was just a little burnt out, and I decided to make a quick jump to something very similar with inside the industry. And not only did I kind of do almost the same thing, but I left an organization for an organization that didn't quite have the right culture fit or job fit for me. So here I am. I just made this big transition. I posted on LinkedIn. I was telling everybody like, oh, really excited about this, because of course it was like a external sales facing role too. So like on top of that, I needed to start pitching myself in the new opportunity that I had. And I found myself 3 months into it like, this is not it.
Yeah.
This is not it. But where I was stuck was the fact that I didn't know what was next. And I never even really thought about allowing myself to take a break or a retirement or a sabbatical as somebody that is working since 14. And like every time I had time off, if it was fall breaks or winter breaks, if it was summer, if it was on the weekends, if I had a day off, like I was always trying to pick up shifts and get a lot of work done and always make money. And it didn't dawn on me that someone could take time off of work, especially a mid-20 something, until someone kind of knocked me on the head and gave me this option. He's like, hey, you told me like you saved enough. Why don't you just like create some white space for yourself and take a sabbatical? And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
that's crazy. So I decided to do that. And he also left me with some really cool advice and said, the first half of that sabbatical, spend that time and your energy and your focus on something that you always wanted to do, but you've never done it because of work. He's like, don't think about work. Don't think about what's next. Like you can leave your last few months of your sabbatical for that. Focus on a project that you've always wanted to do. And as soon as he told me that, I knew what it was. And that was podcasting. Yeah. 4 years ago,
Nice.
4+ years ago, I started this podcast totally as just a sabbatical project. I thought that's all I was going to do. I was going to do it through the sabbatical, and then I was going to let it go whenever I re-entered the workforce. But it really energized me and created a new passion in me, and almost even allowed me to like step into a new career, because now I run a podcast production company with my brother, and that would have never happened if I didn't jump into podcasting, and that would have never happened if I didn't start a mini retirement.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that often. Like it creates a shift in trajectory, and it creates all of this momentum, that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't kind of broken out of all of those old patterns.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's get into like the actual design, the execution of mini retirements, because I think some people have some ideas for like what they would do if they had time off. Let's actually talk about how you get time off. And I think the big one out there is like, how do I propose this to my manager? Like, how do I actually get time off? And I don't know if you have different trains of thoughts for if somebody just wants to outright quit and they're just going to leave their employer versus somebody that's going to ask for a sabbatical or some time off. But I'd love to hear from you as somebody that's coached people through this process. How should they go about approaching their manager and proposing something like this?
So I usually recommend, whether if you're trying to decide, should I stay with an employer or should I separate? I think a great qualifier is how long you want this time off. So usually in the 1 to 2 months, I think it's worth asking your current employer. Typically longer ones, if it's going to be 6 months or a year, for a lot of logistical HR reasons, oftentimes you have to separate from that employer, even if you both are hoping that you go back to that role. But if you're just looking for a month off, and I always encourage people to start with a month, because it's kind of like, don't let, perfect be good be the enemy of perfect. Mm-hmm. I'll talk to people who are like, I want to take a year off and I want to travel the entire world and I want to do all of this. And I'm like, that's amazing. Let's start with a month, because they're like, well, I can do that. Maybe in 5 years I can do that. I'm like, yes, you should do that in 5 years. How about this year we do a month? And, you practice, you get some clarity, you get some confidence, and then you can scale it up when the time is right. But with your current employer, I always encourage people to start with what's your mini retirement story? What is the narrative? How are you going to craft this story so that it comes across in a way that will be beneficial to you? So framing it in a way that's positive, framing it in a way that it makes it seem like a one-time event, that it's a specific event, and especially if it has like a deadline. And it doesn't have to be, when you're thinking about what's the specific thing or what's the one-time thing, that doesn't have to be your entire mini retirement, but you have to have this as kind of an anchor point. It's much easier to say, okay, I want to go to Spain and I want to hike the Camino, and that's going to take me 5 weeks. Or my mom always planned to like bike through Croatia with my dad when they retired, but he passed away and now it's her 60th birthday. Like, can I go do this one specific, positive, time-sensitive thing? Or I wanted to hike Kilimanjaro for my honeymoon. And it's a lot easier to get support and for people to rally around that versus going and be like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't know what I want to do with my life. And like, I feel really burned out. Like, I just need a break. It's hard to get as much support for things that are kind of vague or negative. So first, starting with that story. And then the next thing is, and this is a little counterintuitive, but thinking about all of the reasons why your boss will say no. Having radical empathy to where you can imagine their hesitations, their fears, the challenges that they'll face, not just so you can bring solutions to those. Definitely come to the meeting with solutions, but I also encourage people to vocalize whatever hesitation you think your employer is going to feel. Because people generally don't want to share their hesitation. They don't want to share their frustration. They don't want to share their fear. And so if you vocalize it for them, it can help jumpstart this to be a very creative and collaborative process, and to where they feel safe to share, like, yes, I am worried about that. And you're like, don't worry, I brought some solutions as well. So yeah, coming into it, wanting it to be creative and collaborative and knowing that it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I like the radical empathy that you're talking about, and just the perspective change and thinking about it from the lens of who you're asking. What might be their difficulties? I think most good managers, even average managers out there, will want to do what is best for their employees. And if you come with this goal, hiking the Camino, because I've always wanted to do it, and it's got to be 5 weeks, and you can see the excitement, they're going to want to say yes. But there are logistical things or fears or obstacles that they're got to need to think through too. And I like that. I like the creativity and almost kind of putting down the walls right away and being like, I'm here to work with you to get this done, as long as you kind of meet me somewhere in the middle too, knowing this is something that I want to do. Here are like the parameters that I'm looking for.
It's really important that you don't dump this problem in their lap. Because I've managed teams of people, and honestly, your manager, their plate is full.
Yeah.
Their bandwidth is full. Their schedule is full. They don't have space for optional problems. So if they can just say no, and this whole problem goes away, then that's the easiest thing. Which kind of leads me to another point. Your greatest leverage is a willingness to leave.
Yeah.
Because it changes the equation. It goes from they can just say no and problem disappears and they get to go on with their life, versus if they say no, they have a new problem. And that new problem is they have to hire someone else, and they have to train someone else, and that someone else might not be as good as you. You're giving them problem A or problem B. Problem A, I leave for a month, but I brought all of these solutions. Or problem B, you replace me.
Yeah.
And your goal, your objective is to make problem A so much easier and simpler for them than problem B.
Yeah, even like if we extrapolate that out and you're asking for 3 months, even 6 months, people start to get a little scared and worried that an employer is not going to bite on that. And that may be true, but I routinely heard you, whenever I was researching you, kind of extrapolate out that line of thinking a little bit and be like, okay, cool. Let's go to option B then. And they know you're willing to walk away because this is something that's really important to you and you want to do it. So option B now is to replace you. And everyone that's been in this kind of environment realizes the journey or the timeline of replacing somebody. Even at the lowest of levels, it's like, all right, cool. We need to offload that work that they had to somebody else and help somebody else maybe get cross-trained or up and going on that. Now I need to put out a job description. Now I need to collect resumes. Now I need to interview. Now I need to select a candidate. Now I need to allow that candidate the time to go put his or her 2 weeks in and transition to this role. Now I need to go through onboarding, which may be somewhere between 1 month and 12 months. Like whenever you start putting out that timeline, and then you got the big hanging thing out there too. Like they just might not be as good of an employee as you either. Like if you're a good employee, this has got to be a little bit more of an easy conversation for you. But you put that timeline out there and it's like, it's easy to see that you leaving for 6 months or you walking away, it's still maybe or probably a 6-month problem for that person to think through and solve.
Yep, absolutely.
I also like the creativity that you were bringing up. You used this example, like maybe there is a process or a task that is going to be hard to pull off of your desk and onto someone else's. And you like even gave me the permission. It's like, cool, you want to take a mini retirement? You can, but that doesn't mean that like you have to be 100% out of work. Like maybe as a business owner, maybe as a W-2 employee, there might be some things that you can just hold on. You can really scale back or skinny. Maybe there is this weekly or monthly report that takes a lot of massaging and you're the one that knows all of this and it's just got to take some time to give that to someone else. Well, maybe you give your employer 1 hour a week where you'll clean up that report, run that report and get that to the right person. Like that still constitutes a mini retirement then. It's okay.
Yeah, I always encourage people, you think about all the challenges, you think of all the solutions, and there still might be a couple things that are big problems with no solution. And so in this negotiation, in this collaborative process, what are the things that you can compromise on that you don't give very much, but it makes a huge difference in this whole thing working? And there again, working 2 or 4 hours a week, if that's what needs to happen, is still going to be a lot better than staying and working 50 hours a week. You know, you could still get 90% of the benefit of the mini retirement in a way that's a lot less risk, especially if you're a business owner. I really don't encourage business owners, especially the first mini retirement, to step away 100%. Because the juice is not worth the squeeze. It is so much more risk. It is so much more work. It is so much more preparation to be able to step away 100% versus stepping away 90, 95%. It's like the 80-20 principle. Yeah. You know, it's not worth it the first time. Honestly, for a lot of business owners, it's so stressful to be completely disconnected that the benefit cost of the stress is kind of a wash anyway. So, you know, most business owners, maybe it's an hour a day, maybe it's 4 hours a week that they check in. And I always encourage them to delegate 90%. Mm-hmm. You know, what's the 90% of a task that someone else can do? Or what's the 90% of your job that someone else can do? And then you still take on the 10% that you just don't trust other people to take care of.
Yeah, for sure. So let's assume we got the yes. And now we're on the other side. And I'm approaching my mini retirement and I'm thinking through, how do I add some structure to this so that I'm not wasting my time? I'm not floundering. I didn't ask for a month off and then, you know, the first couple of weeks I'm napping and playing video games and, you know, just rejuvenating. And all of a sudden I'm looking up and it's like, oh, next week I got to go back to work. And I didn't really do anything in terms of what I intended to do with my mini retirement. Is there some bumpers, guidelines that you can give us that kind of put some structure to mini retirements?
Yeah, I always encourage people, you know, that list that you ran off of 10 kind of focuses or intentions, to pick 1 to 3, depending on the length of your mini retirement, and then to fully optimize for that intention. So if, let's say your goal, you pick two and you want to recover from burnout and you want to travel, every day should focus on just those two things. And you should travel in a way that helps you recover from burnout, and they should complement each other. Like, don't pick things that won't complement each other. You know, sometimes people are like, I want to recover from burnout and start a business. Like, those two things do not go together. It's like strawberries and garlic. Like, don't try to mix those ingredients. One of the things that can be helpful is creating kind of a mock schedule. Like, what's your ideal day to enjoy travel? What's your ideal day to pursue a passion project? What's your ideal day to recover from burnout? And what would it look like in the context of a week? And so really thinking through, how am I going to accomplish this? What's it going to look like? And mapping it out a little bit. And it's not that you have to be overly strict, but most people aren't very good at organizing their own time, simply because we've had no practice. Since the time we started preschool, other people have organized our time for us. They've told us what to focus on, when to show up, how long to be there, what success looks like. You know, they've given us all these metrics, and now we're 100% responsible for that. So kind of creating, I call them false boundaries. They're false because you made them up, but they're boundaries that give us a little bit of a container to make sure that we're staying on track. And then another tool that's really helpful is having a check-in point, whether that's daily or weekly or monthly, because you will get off track. Things will go sideways a little bit, and you need an opportunity to assess, how's this going? You know, what was my intention? Am I living up to that intention?
I like that. Put some structure around it, check-ins, maybe one thing a day, picking one or two, maybe three of the intentions that you really set out. I like that. I think that gives me structure whenever I was even thinking back through my mini retirement. I didn't have a coach like you. It probably would have been helpful, but I accidentally did some of those things. You know, well, my mini retirement went through 2020. So a lot of my travel went to the wayside that I was planning. But with the whole podcast, it was nice because I wanted to do one important task related to podcasting every single day. And I did that. And I made sure I prioritized that. It was usually first thing in the morning. So it gave me some structure. I kind of held on to that. And then I if it was 2:00, my type A, mentality would have probably been like, oh my gosh, like what else do I need to get done today? But it was so nice during that time period too, where I was just like, I did what I intended to do today. It's 2:00. That's totally fine. Go do whatever you want to do now.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about your other friends, family, colleagues, setting your manager aside, you already got the yes from them. You're getting ready to do this, or maybe you're in the beginning stages of your mini retirement and you're starting to get some questions from people. Like you're telling people about this, and maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your siblings, maybe it's friends, maybe it's coworkers, and they're starting to question you. And, you're getting some pushback on mini retirements. How would you advise somebody handle that situation?
Well, here's the great double purpose of the mini retirement story we've crafted to tell your manager, is that you are going to use the same framework with everybody else. And it helps give them some parameters of why you're doing it, why is it important to you, kind of what the scope is. And I would encourage people, like, if you don't, especially if it's open-ended and you don't have a specific answer, give like a concrete answer, even if it's vague. If people are like, well, what are you going to do after this? What are you going to do for your next job? You're saying, well, actually right now, my first 6 months, here's my focus. And then at 6 months, I plan to really start investigating that. That's my plan. My plan is to take some time and figure it out. And this is true in a lot of disciplines, but like I always encourage people, answer any honest question. And an honest question is something that like has an actual answer. Like, what would you like to do after this? Versus questions that are born out of other people's fear or insecurity. Are you sure you're making the right choice? Have you really thought this through?
Oh,
I'm scared that you're ruining your career. What is the plan here? And so realizing that most people speak from their experience and their history and their fear and their motivations, and they will inadvertently put that on you. And if push comes to shove, a few tools that I like is one, just kind of naming that that's what's happening. I realize this wouldn't be the best choice for you. I realize that this might not be something you're interested in, but I am. I realize that this would be very scary for you, but I feel good about this choice. And so there again, kind of naming their fear and then putting a boundary between their fear and your reality. Or last ditch effort, especially for like family, if they just can't stop. They can't stop asking those like unhonest questions. My go-to is, I would really appreciate it if you could be happy for my happiness.
Oh, man, that one hit. I've seen this play out a couple of times during my own mini retirement. It was unfortunate, but both my parents didn't really understand what I was doing with that time. And luckily, I did have my mini retirement story, and I kind of gave some context for it. And I had to give a little bit of pushback over time. But throughout, the couple of months, I took 7 months off. Eventually, they started to understand. They started to realize I wasn't just playing video games all day long. I did have intention behind it. I was doing something different that maybe they don't quite understand, but at the same time, they realized I was utilizing that time off in a way that was probably going to set me up for greater things in the future too. So
yeah,
maybe there's just a period where someone just doesn't understand, and that's on them. And maybe they'll come to understand, maybe not.
I always encourage people, like, there's this idea that, we've been given a vision for what this could be, for what our life could be. And the reality is no one else was given our vision, so they can't see it. And most people won't actually see it until it's done. And I think sometimes we spend so much time and so much energy and so much angst trying to sell people on a vision that they did not receive because it was given to us. And instead just say, like, you know what? It's okay that you don't see it. It's okay that you don't get it. I do. So I'm going to go do it. And then once it's done and it's there and I've created it, I think you'll see it. And just trusting that process. But I see a lot of people just spinning themselves up, trying to constantly be a salesman for a vision that no one else received. Like, it's theirs. It's theirs to honor. It's theirs to follow through on. It's their work to do.
So Jillian, as we're closing up this conversation, I know one big thing that we haven't touched on that I know many listeners are probably going to be afraid of, or at least thinking about, especially with the people that I speak to in the world of financial independence, is reconciling embracing a mini retirement versus delaying your journey to FI. Like, I know you probably have a lot of thoughts around this. Many people just can't stomach, especially my heavy math people like myself. It's like, oh my gosh, if I take 6 months off, then it's got to do this to my net worth, and it's got to delay this on my FIRE journey. It's like, oh man. So can we talk about that? Maybe you open up the conversation, and I think I'm probably gonna have a couple of follow-up conversations for you.
Yeah, there's a few things. There's a few things to consider. One, on the practical side, this doesn't have to delay your journey to financial independence. And in reality, for a lot of people, if this is your intention, it will accelerate your path to FI. During 2 of our mini retirements, we bought and renovated rental properties, and that has had a massive impact at how fast we got to financial independence. Some people have done career pivots. Some people have started side hustles. Some people got something going that created some passive income. Or some people, because they took this break, I met up with a friend in DC. He took a year off, came back at his new job at 150% of his old salary. And he got a bonus that covered like 70% of his year off. So if you think about your career a little bit more creatively, you can strategically put these mini retirements, dot them all the way through, and massively increase your lifetime earning potential and maybe create a lot of passive income that's going to make that transition into financial independence so much easier. So on the math side, there's one side of it. But even if you opted not to do any of that and went back to the exact same kind of salary range you were at before, I see so many people, especially in the FI space, head down, pushing through, grinding it out, trying to get to FI as fast as possible, and in the process, kind of bankrupting their personal life, not testing it, not experimenting, not trying to optimize for happiness, always trying to optimize for financial growth. And they do not do well in early retirement because they've never practiced. They've never tested it. And if you think like, well, I'm a little nervous to take 6 months off, to take the next 40 years off is not less scary. It is much scarier. And the more people practice and kind of test and scale what they want this FI lifestyle to be, the easier it is to transition into early retirement.
Yeah, I think that just summarized everything that I really love about mini retirements. Just the fact that you should be kind of test driving the personal life as well as kind of taking care of yourself on the financial side. And they'll marry at some point in time, and hopefully you'll find a blend between each of them, and you'll be able to pull in more personal life and have to worry less about the financial responsibilities as your net worth grows and you take care of yourself more and more over time. But you don't want to get to the quote end of the finish line in terms of reaching financial independence and then be like, well, now what am I got to do? You know, the only thing I was really doing over the last 10, 15, 20 years was work. I have no idea how I want to spend this time. And I think that's the one more years type syndrome that gets in the way. And these people that probably take mini retirements, they got a taste of it and they're like, whoa, I want to insert even more of that into my life. And that 1 year syndrome probably isn't quite as strong because they kind of understand or they know what the other side looks like right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jillian, this was a refreshing conversation. I know we kind of touched on a lot of different things. Mini retirements, if you want to do it right now or not, I do kind of want to close on this thought around the mini retirement go bag, because sometimes unexpected events happen. Like maybe we are planning out a mini retirement for you sometime in the next year, but a mini retirement opportunity might just appear. So maybe you don't feel like it's right now, but maybe unfortunately it could be a layoff that's in the future. And you almost are granted the opportunity to take a mini retirement. And like the biggest thing that I loved when researching you was this practice around asking yourself, what does this make possible? You know, when one of these unexpected events happen, what does this make possible? So can you close us out just talking about the mini retirement go bag?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I talked about how maybe getting laid off and binging Netflix and eating Cheetos is not a mini retirement. It can be really hard to emotionally pivot from bad news and to say, you know what? I'm going to lean in. I'm going to do all these cool things. It's hard to shift gears. But one thing that makes it easier is this mini retirement go bag. So taking a couple hours, taking a weekend, plotting out what are 4 or 5 or 6 different options of a mini retirement. Maybe they take a month. What are all of the details? Where would you go? What would you do? What would you focus on? What would it look like? What's that mock schedule? What's the budget for these? When's the best time of year to go? And you have, let's say, these 6 mapped out. You realize the cost of them's, let's say, $3,000, and you set that in a savings account. And then bad stuff happens, because a lot of bad stuff happens in life. And in that emotional dysregulation, when you can't even think or plan or have any optimism, you pull out that Google Doc or you pull out that notebook and you say, well, when I was in a better frame of mind, what did I think was a good idea? And you pick the one that makes the most sense. And it's like a go bag. Like I used to watch NCIS. Their little go bag, they had like a change of clothes and some cash and their passport, and they could just grab it and off to the airport. You have all of this packed and ready, metaphorically. So when something comes up that you weren't expecting, It might still take a day or a week to emotionally be like, okay, so what does this make possible? But you'll have this thing ready, and you can just lean into the opportunity that life presented you.
So good. So good. Jillian, where can people connect with you, learn more about you, follow some of the amazing content that you're also creating?
Yeah, online, I'm at Retire Often, and that's also the name of my podcast where I just share mini retirement stories. If you want some of the life planning kind of those first exercises, it's retireoften/mini. Or on social media, I'm at Jillian Johnsrud across all platforms.
Jillian, final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't normally covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
I think it would be around this idea of this old system of a 30, 40-year career where you just work continuously and then you retire continuously. It doesn't exist anymore. It's not available. And even the idea that like your company will provide all of your needs and they'll take care of everything you need doesn't exist anymore. So what does this new path look like where we have multiple jobs and multiple careers and multiple breaks in between, and we take small retirements instead of 130-year long? How do we craft kind of this more creative, career and retirement and financial organization? Because that old system that worked for maybe our parents or our grandparents just doesn't exist now.
That'd be such a fun class, and also probably not an approved class because I'm not sure if that's what college is pitching, but I think it'd be a really, really, really useful class for sure. Once again, Jillian Johnsrud. Jillian, man, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, I appreciate your kind words. If you want to leave us a rating and review on your podcast player right now, that would absolutely make my day. If you want to find episode show notes, our blog, and other great resources, head over to tsirpodcast.com. If you have follow-up questions, an idea for a future episode, or just want to say hi, we have a contact form on our website, and those messages go straight into my inbox, and I promise you, I will reply. But all right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I love you all, and you're not alone. Let's keep making it through our struggles together.